Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services today, I'm going to kindly ask that we turn off or silence all cell phones, electronic devices. Thank you.
Welcome. A Hanukkah Prayer for Difficult Times by Jacqueline Goldfinger. Praise be to you, Adonai, ruler of the universe, creator of darkness and light. We sing of your glory, Ledor Vador, from generation to generation, in quiet prayer and in roaring celebration. As we prepare to light the candles, we remember that even a dark, desecrated place can be rededicated to you. There is nowhere your light does not reach, no darkness that is beyond you. The cracks in our broken hearts let the light in. They make space for growth, renewal, and healing. This Hanukkah, we rededicate ourselves to you in worship and in study, in thought and in deed, in joy and in hardship, working towards Dveikut, deepening our connection with you for all time, and let us say, Amen. So once again, welcome. Welcome to those gathered here in the chapel and to those gathered with us remotely on the live stream. Those from far away, your presence is felt here with us in the chapel. We breathe, we hold one another, and we mindfully join together to form a community that is brought together today for sacred purpose as we gather in memory of Joseph Golkow, Yosef ben David of blessed memory. Hanukkah takes place at the darkest time of the year. Tomorrow marks the winter solstice, and Hanukkah begins in just 5 days when it coincides with some other holiday that people in our orbit celebrate. You know, it was expressed to me that Joe was a challenging man. And as all gathered today hold different and conflicting emotions together, no matter what it is that we are individually carrying today, we bring light during a dark time as we, with intention, perform the mitzvah of Havayat Hamet, accompanying the deceased. There is a famous debate recorded in the Talmud, Masechet Shabbat 21b, between the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai, about how it is that one should light the Chanukah menorah, the Chanukiah. The house of Shammai says that on the first night of Hanukkah, the menorah should be at its fullest, with all the candles on and lit, because the original vial of oil was at its fullest when Hanukkah began, when the miracle started, and it gradually depleted over the 8 days of the holiday, the 8 days of the miracle. Rabbi Hillel, on the other hand, says that we start with one candle, and each night that the oil lasted, the miracle grew, so the light of God increased. We therefore experience a Hanukkah in which each night, when we kindle the lights, the miracle grows, more light flows, and we become agents of bringing light to the world and to one another. As we all experience death, and this death differently, we are united in our desire to shine divine light over a dark moment. We add the light of mitzvot in performance of mitzvot in Joe's memory, and we find light and feel the warmth of God's divine light together here today, God willing. So more formally, today we mourn and provide the final rituals for Joe Golkow, Yosef ben David, Zichrono Livracha, of blessed memory. Joe is predeceased by his parents, David and Anne, of blessed memory, and his wife, Ida, of blessed memory. He's survived by his companion of 18 years, Mildred, and her family. And his children, Andrew and his wife, Susan, Lisa and her husband, John, Wendy, and Curtis and his wife, Michelle. His grandchildren, Catherine and her husband, Michael, Cheryl and her husband, Mark, Melanie and her husband, Adam, Rachel and her husband, Paul, Jessica, and Shayna and her husband Ben, and David. And great-grandchildren Jackson, Caden, Mara, Jordan, Grant, and Adam. I pray I got every name correct. Did I? Okay, thank you. May your care and connection to one another, God willing, carry you through this loss and transition. Our Jewish tradition teaches that while the physical body is temporary, the soul is eternal. So today, as we gather for sacred purpose, we pray for full and complete rest for Joe's body, and we note that his soul remains bound to the bond of life to each of you, and we seek blessings for the continued elevation of his soul. May our time together today have purpose and deep meaning, and may it honor well Joe's memory. My name is Rabbi Nathan Weiner. I'm a rabbi locally here in southern New Jersey, and it's an honor and representation of myself, my family, and the Jewish people to be present here with you today. Now going to read Psalm 23, a psalm used universally across the Abrahamic faith traditions at moments of loss and grief. I'm going to read it first in the Hebrew, followed by a standard translation in the English, and if you're comfortable and wish to in either language, in all or in part, you're welcome to say it with me. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo achsar, bin otesha yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yinahaleni. Nafshi yeshoveh v'ncheni b'maglei tzedek l'ma'an shemo. Gam ki elech b'getzel mavet lo irara ki atay madi. Shivtecha al mishantecha hema yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai. Dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yerdefuni kol yemei chayai. V'shavti bevet Adonai le'orech yamim. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen v'amen. From Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, chapter 3. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what has been planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time for silence and a time for speaking. Now is a time for speaking, as Joe's son Andrew has prepared some words to share as a eulogy today. Yes, come on up. Ready.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. On behalf of myself, my sisters Lisa and Wendy, my loving and supportive wife Susan, our brother Kurt, and Dad's loving companion Mildred, thank you for coming here today to help us fulfill what in Judaism is called a mitzvah. A mitzvah means, in this context, a rule that God has set out for us to follow. Specifically, our mitzvah, or duty, is to memorialize, commemorate, and bury our dad, Joseph Golkow, in accordance with the customs and traditions of our faith. It means so much to our family that you all cared about Joe Golkow enough to take the time and effort to help us mourn and to do our duty as dictated by our customs and traditions. Mourning can be tough, but my friends who are engineers tell me that a structure is most stable when the weight is spread over a wider base. Again, I thank you all for helping us to spread that weight and to make it easier to mourn. Personally, when I face a stressful or difficult situation, I find comfort in our religious texts and traditions. There is a roadmap to follow, and if you follow that roadmap, you'll come through on the other side. Our Torah gives us examples of complicated family situations where at death, families come together to get the job done. In Genesis, we read how our first patriarch, Abraham, believed he was told by God to sacrifice his son, Isaac. Fortunately, a very unlucky ram happened to come along at just the right time and was substituted at the last minute. But think of how it must have affected Isaac. Abraham's other son, Ishmael, also had issues with Abraham. In Genesis, we read that Abraham's wife, Sarah, told Abraham to kick out Hagar, his mom, and her son into the wilderness of Beersheba. And that wilderness is not like it is today. Right now, Beersheba is a huge town. They have a university there. A little bit to the west, there's an IDF base. There's a kibbutz. You can always call an Uber. But that's not how it was 37 years ago. And I can tell you from experience, it is hot and it is dry, and you have to really, really hydrate. In our story, Ishmael almost dies of thirst, so bad that his mother couldn't even look. She couldn't even watch. And she moves away from her dying son in order not to have to watch his last moments. But God intervenes. Hagar and Ishmael are saved, and there's a happy ending. But in Genesis, we read that when Abraham died, Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him in the cave of Machpelah. They came together and did what our customs and traditions mandate that we do. And so following our customs and traditions, we honor, mourn, and bury Joseph Golkow. Joseph Michael Golkow was born on March 17, 1927, to David and Ann Golkow, the fifth child of 9 who were born to that family. His dad, David Golkow, was an immigrant from what is now the Ukraine. And they had a tough experience. He had a tough experience in the Russian army before arriving in the U.S. in 1913. I tell people when they ask, how did your grandfather David Golkow get out of the Russian army? And I call it a self-initiated discharge. He fled. Joe was a self-made man, and his experiences growing up in the Depression gave him the drive, the hunger, and the tenacity to succeed. He sometimes told me of his experiences growing up, having had hand-me-down shoes that were not in the best condition. There might be food in the refrigerator, but not enough for everyone to just take what they wanted when they wanted. He graduated from Overbrook High School in June 1945, and while World War II was still on, and immediately went into the Army at the end of June of 1945. And at that time, remember, the atomic bomb was still a secret. The atomic bomb was going to be dropped about 6 weeks after my dad went into the Army, but they didn't know about it. Certainly it was a tightly kept secret. They didn't know about it. And as far as they knew, they were going to be ramped up for the invasion of Japan that was certain to be coming. He was trained as a field artillery crewman and completed his training at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He completed his training in November 1945 and was ultimately sent to Germany as part of what was then the American occupation force in Germany post-World War II. He was honorably discharged in 1947. He entered Temple University. He received his degree in accounting in 1951, and he made a career at accounting. He became a CPA in 1959, and he's ultimately built a very successful CPA practice. What was telling about Joe is he, quote, sold, and I'm using air quotes, he sold his accounting practice some years ago. And under the agreement, he was supposed to provide a certain number of hours over a 3-year period after the closing. Well, he provided all those hours in the first year. Sitting still was not in his forte, and he continued to do accounting work. And the last accounting work that he had, he finally put down at the age of 90. He married twice and had 4 kids: me, my sister Lisa, Wendy, and Kurt. So, what about the man? Well, one of the first and foremost, he lived his life as a Jew. He was born Jewish, lived his life Jewish, and died Jewish. When I look back, at least in the last year, I had the honor to serve in a volunteer program in Israel, where we actually volunteered as an auxiliary to the IDF and worked on an IDF base. And I had perhaps one, not the greatest honor, but one of the greatest honors in my life was to put on the uniform of the IDF. And I think Dad was really, that touched Dad. I would send Dad pictures of, here's me at this IDF base, not far from where Hagar and Ishmael wandered in the desert, but it's still hot and dry. But he was, I think, touched to see his son wearing the uniform of the IDF. His business sense, in Yiddish we have a word called sechel, which means loosely translated as common sense. And his business sechel, or his business sense, was spectacular. He was sharp, and he remained sharp all along. One of the things that one time he did some work for a client doing a business transformation, and he drafted the documents by himself. And when my brother Kurt and I heard, at first we thought, oh, that could be dicey. But when we looked at the papers that Dad prepared, he had it nailed. It was exactly right. And we both said to ourselves, as he starts to fail, his business sechel will be the last thing to go. That will stay. He didn't just do accounting work for his clients, he served his clients. In many cases, he had a deep, long-lasting friendships with those he served. In a lot of ways, he said, I am a unicorn. I am the last of a dying breed. There's others today who will do accounting work through the computer and not necessarily interface as much. He was there with his clients, and they loved him for it. He had very long-standing relationships because he made their problems his problems. I think he got a lot of his business sechel from his father, David Golkow. And there's a story, a very brief story, from my dad's growing up. In the Passover Seder, there's a ceremonial piece of matzah called the afikomen. And you need, the very last act of the Seder is to eat the afikomen. Without that, you can't conclude the Seder. And what a lot of families will do is to hide the afikomen, and it's a way of keeping young kids engaged. They hide the afikomen, the kids go and find it, whoever finds it gets a prize. But what my grandfather David did is when you found the afikomen, you had to negotiate with him and haggle over what that prize should be. So one year, my father, as a young boy, finds the afikomen, and he brings it to David, and he apparently had an inflated value as to what that afikomen was worth. And he haggled and haggled and haggled and wouldn't come down in price. And so finally, our Pop Golkow said, tell you what, keep it. You now have a piece of, this other piece of matzah will be the afikomen. But he learned from the master. He was very good at negotiating, very good at haggling, and I suspect over his career, he didn't repeat the mistake with the afikomen. He had an interesting sense of humor. All the people who knew him could testify to that. His friends share stories of how he could joke around. He could punctuate a point with humor, sometimes tinged with a little bit of sarcasm. A quick story. I remember when my cousin Ron had his bar mitzvah, we went down to Salisbury, Maryland, and stayed at the luxurious Temple Hills Motel on Route 13 in Salisbury. And Lisa and Wendy was a baby at the time, so he brought Lisa and I. And in this hotel room, if you all remember, it was one of these beds where it says you get a massage, put a quarter in and you get a massage. And so Lisa and I begged him, come on, put a quarter in so we can get this massage. And Dad was going, all it does is shake the bed, you know? And so we're going, oh, please. And he said, what do you expect, a hand to reach out and start to rub you? And just the thought of the hand reaching out like the Thing from the Addams Family just struck me as really funny. And that kind of stuck with me. And that was kind of emblematic of his sense of humor. We never did get that 25-cent massage because I think Dad was right. It just shakes the bed. You don't get anything hands-on. So today is the day we bid goodbye to Joe Golkow. We wish him peace and tranquility in whatever God's plan is. And I'm sure Dad wishes the best for us in whatever lies ahead. Dad left us with a CD containing some of his thoughts and final words to us. We will now play some of that CD so we can share Joe's farewell to all of us.
Please be seated. I would like to thank everyone who was here for your support and sympathy to my family. Look how lucky you all are. This is the last time you will hear my voice. So who am I? Do you really know me? Let me give you a short synopsis of my early life growing up. I was born during the Depression. I was the fifth child of 9. I did household jobs and worked at an early age. Did you ever work in a coal furnace? Did you ever deliver mail on cold, snowy days in December? Did you ever work in an ice cream factory? Did you ever had a newspaper route? Did you ever work on a farm? Did you ever sell magazines at a football game at Franklin Field? Did you ever live in a row house? Did you ever try to figure out how 9 children slept in 3 bedrooms? Did you ever have black gangs after you when school let out? Did you ever have to lay on the floor of the bus until it left the school area? Do you think any of these may have influenced me in some manner? So who am I? I was the 3rd son of my parents who was drafted into the Army. After leaving the Army, I took advantage of the GI Bill of Rights. I attended Temple University and received a Bachelor of Science degree. I became a CPA, and that became my profession. In the workplace, I experienced anti-Semitism that drove me to be better than my competitors. And so, I succeeded beyond my original expectations. I became a member of the Pennsylvania Institute of Certified Public Accountants, the New Jersey Society of Certified Public Accountants. I was also a member of the Pittman Rotary Club. So who am I? What do you think? Most of you are followers, not leaders. Who says what is the proper clothing attire? You don't. You copy what the fashion designer says. Who says what is the proper etiquette? You don't. You copy. When you decorate, is it your taste, or are you concerned how it looks to others? Is someone else's opinion more important than yours? Of course, it depends on the subject. Do you think it's more important what others think of you than what you think of yourself? Some of you eat at restaurants, some at diners, some at fast foods and takeouts. So what? I did these things to suit me, not others. While my wife was in a nursing home, in a wheelchair, not mentally alert to suit others, should I have stayed home and stopped living? I was told, please be careful where you go and with whom, because we are all part of the same community, and you know what the neighbors and friends might think and say. Who cares? But I attended a bar mitzvah with a companion and even danced. So what? I did it my way. At services on Yom Kippur, you ask for forgiveness for the sin that you have committed in gossip. There would be no need if you didn't. So I ask, is it important to you to think of what others might think and say? Or is it important what you think of yourself?
Well, thank you, Dad, for those words. I think the operative word there is I did it my way. I think for all the people who knew Joe Golkow, that's the Frank Sinatra song is probably an anthem. So to conclude, at this point, I just want to express my My love and thanks to my loving family, to my wonderful wife Susan, without which I don't think it would have been immeasurably difficult to get through the last couple days. To my wonderful daughters, Kate and Sherry, who I call them my emotional support daughters. We should all be so lucky to have emotional support family like that. To my siblings and my cousins, my closest friends, my family, I thank you all for being here. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. For me, it is a surreal day, the day I bury my father. Our family appreciates all of you for helping to perform this mitzvah. Thank you very much.
We now transition to the central prayer of a Jewish memorial service, El Malei Rachamim, that asks that as we prepare to inter Joe shortly at Locustwood, and there will be military honors present for him as well, in acknowledgement of his committed service to our country, I ask you to please rise for El Malei Rachamim as we offer a prayer that is a well-wish for the elevation of his soul. I'll read it first in English translation, followed by chanting in the Hebrew. O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant true rest upon the wings of the divine presence in the exalted spheres of the holy and pure, who shine as resplendence of the firmament to the soul of Joseph Golkow, who has gone to his eternal home. For charity has been donated in remembrance of his soul. May his place of rest be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may the All-Merciful One shelter him with the cover of God's wings forever and bind his soul in the bond of life. Adonai is his heritage. May he rest in his resting place in peace, and let us say, Amen. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'Tehorim, Kezohar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Yosef ben David, Shehalach La'olamo, Ba'avor Shenadvu Tzedakah Ba'ad Hazkarat Nishmato, Began Eden Dehe Menuchato, Lachen Bal HaRachamim Yastirehu B'Seter Kenafav La'olamim, V'yitzror HaChayim Et Nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, v'yanuach al mishkavo b'shalom, v'nomar, Amen. Please be seated. Our formal time together here at the chapel is drawing to a close. Immediately following our time together here, as I said, we're going to make our way in processional to Locustwood Memorial Park on Route 70 in Cherry Hill. The family also asks that donations in lieu of flowers please be made to the Birthright Israel Foundation, a cause dear to his heart, a trip that I learned that a number of his grandchildren went on and had powerful experiences on as well.
Good, that's fine.